Now, just say 5 years from now, Fremantle and North Melbourne are in the grand final, and you and I are having a beer at the grand final.
Right?
What is the America that you really want to see out of this? Like we've obviously got the reaction now, and we've still got some protests. And okay, the protests subside, and what is it in 5 years' time that is meaningful change that we've actually moved forward? The entire world, but
The
more
entire world.
specifically America.
Yeah, I think that you have to put in some very serious police reforms. I think that to not classify the Fraternal Order of Police as an actual union because they've been running like a mafia for years, and this whole culture of the thin blue line, that absolutely has to change. The other thing that has to change is in arresting tactics, that there are certain physical things that should not be used.
Yeah.
I would also think police do not need to have guns. There's got to be something, a taser, something like that, that would momentarily stun somebody. I think that's something, but I also think it has to go hand in hand with gun reform because there are too many guns on the streets in the United States. And I love what Australia has done. When there was that massacre in Tasmania, that very shortly after that, those weapons were banned. Now, granted, I'm sure that there are some guns on the black market out there and people have access to them, but you have to really start with America's gun culture. And I think it also goes with the police totally. We talk about this with AFL clubs, that there has to be a change in culture. There has to be a change in this view, it's us against them. That has to change. There's one of the things that's being spray painted in some of these protests is the acronym ACAB, all cops are bastards. And I even told my kids today in class, I don't believe that because that's equally bad as someone saying all black men are thugs. And I never want to go there. I know some good cops. I've worked with some good cops as a member of the media. But when you see footage of people acting the way they are in these protests, and still as if they've learned nothing, to still be putting knees on necks, to still be doing chokeholds, to still be shooting first and asking questions later, and slamming people down, and to have this so-called president of this country militarize the police and form in front of the White House and go on the offensive against peaceful protesters, all so he could get a photo op holding a Bible he's never read, is just absolutely absurd. And I mentioned the militarization of the police. That's got to stop. I mean, the police have been using military weaponry, toys, as it looks like, whether it be vehicles, weapons, all of that stuff, uniforms. That has to stop because they look like a paramilitary force. I saw some vision the other day of cops rolling into a neighborhood in the Twin Cities, and it looked like an invading, occupying army. And that has absolutely got to change. But the one thing, Corey, that's really hard is that no matter what kind of body cameras you have, no matter what civilian complaint review boards you have, the thing that has to change is the mindset and that unconscious bias against men of color. That has to change. There has to be such a fundamental change in that to bring that about. It has to, because, I want to be able to turn to a police officer if I need help. The Minnesota governor said it really well. He wants to have a community, a society where people are not running from the police, that they're running to the police. And it's very interesting today because we've been in shelter in place. A lot of the books that I need to teach my kids next year are at school. And I've got a code that I can use on a box outside that will allow me access anytime into the building. And I was talking to the receptionist that runs that part of the front desk, and I asked her about when I could come in. And as soon as she told me that there was some graffiti that was sprayed on a gym that the school is building, and that person had been caught on camera, I said, you know what? I think I'm going to go during the daytime when other people are there, because the reason for that is if I went at night, I know that I would be a target. That somebody, if I wore this jumper with a hood and I'm going anywhere near where that gym is, where there's the graffiti, well, guess who's going to be a suspect then? And guess who might get pounced on and have this whole experience that I had before. So I'm going to go during the day and keep social distance and go get my books, because it affects us in so many ways. There's a great video that just came out, and it's called Difficult Conversations with a Black Man. And this man whose name is Emmanuel, who's a professional athlete, talks about how every move he makes when he steps outside the door has got to be carefully calculated and coordinated. It's the same thing that I feel. When I walk out the house at night to walk the dog, I have a certain route that I take. You know, when I come back toward my apartment complex, I have my keys out, lest anybody see me who's racist and might use their white privilege to use the phone and call me and say, there's a black intruder at my door. No, I want them, you know, and I shouldn't have to do this, but I want them to see my key and my key fob that I'm using to get into the building. Yeah. Right? And because this has happened to me too a couple of times when I visited my mother in different apartment complexes, once in New Jersey and once in Washington, I did have people threaten to call the authorities because they didn't believe that someone who looks like me could be living in their community.
Yeah.
And that's humiliating. That is, I mean, I'm visiting my mother, for God's sake. And one woman who actually, and this hurt even more because the woman who accused me or wanted me to be checked out was a woman of color. And I was at the reception desk, and as if I wasn't even there, she talks to the security guard who happens to be from sub-Saharan Africa. And she says to him, it's a good thing you're checking all these people who come in. And I look at her and I say, I want you to take a real good look at me. What is it about my person that makes you think I don't belong here or couldn't possibly live here or have a family member who lives here? And she had no answer for that because I didn't fit in her preconceived box of what she thought a black man could be.
Yeah. We've got about 10 minutes to go, but what are the things this week that have actually given you a little bit more hope than usual? Like I know you mentioned that not all cops are bad. Like I know some of the footage I'd seen, I think it was maybe in Flint, Michigan, I think it was. Like even when you saw the police chief there walking with people and little different things that we haven't really seen before. I know there's still some bad, but there are hopefully some green shoots.
I hope so too, because when I saw that video of Chris Swanson, I wanted to go give him a big hug. I spend time in Michigan every summer to see my mother, so I know the state pretty well.
Yeah.
And I could not believe what I saw. And, you know, and that I did have a little cry about that, cry of joy, seeing that there is someone who understands, someone that all we're asking for is to be treated like human beings and to be treated with dignity and respect and to see that march. The other cop that I really want to shout out is Art Acevedo, who is Latinx, who is the police chief in Houston. And he very passionately made this speech about he understands what it's like to be a man of color and to be stereotyped and to be told that he won't amount to anything by the racist power structure. But he was out there with the people. I love seeing that. So those are glimmers of hope. The other really big glimmer of hope for me is if you had told me a couple of weeks ago that there would be a massive demonstration in Finland of Finnish people with signs that say Black Lives Matter, I never possibly would have imagined that. I never would have. I mean, that's just beyond my comprehension. And to see people come out from around the world, you know, Finland, Australia, New Zealand, Japan, Germany, all of these, Argentina, all of these places, some of which I've been to, you know, that is tremendous. And seeing so many whites who want to be allies